The intelligence reports crossed the mahogany desk in London, detailing the most sensitive operations of the Western world. The man reviewing them was a pillar of the British establishment, trusted with the nation's deepest secrets. But as he committed the names of covert operatives to memory, he was not calculating how to protect them. He was deciding how quickly he could hand them over to Moscow. This was the reality of Kim Philby, a man who, alongside a tight-knit circle of aristocratic peers, orchestrated the most devastating breach of trust in modern history. For decades, the flow of classified information out of Britain was not a trickle, but a hemorrhage. Every strategic advantage, every compromised cipher, and every Allied vulnerability was quietly packaged and delivered to the KGB. The deception was absolute, woven directly into the fabric of the very institutions designed to hunt foreign agents. They were the foxes guarding the henhouse, operating with total impunity while the world teetered on the brink of nuclear annihilation. The realization of this hemorrhaging trust would eventually shatter the British intelligence community. When the truth finally bled into the light, it did not just expose a catastrophic failure of security. It struck at the very core of the British class system, proving that the ultimate threat wore a tailored suit, spoke with a refined accent, and belonged to the same exclusive clubs as the men hunting him. The psychological wound inflicted upon the nation was profound, a staggering realization that loyalty could not be guaranteed by pedigree. The seeds of this monumental subversion were planted long before the Iron Curtain descended. In the hallowed cloistered halls of Cambridge University during the 1930s, a generation of brilliant minds watched the rise of fascism in Europe with mounting horror. The global economic depression had laid bare the failings of capitalism, and to a select group of idealistic students, the establishment they were born to inherit appeared morally bankrupt. They sought a radical alternative, a cause pure enough to demand their absolute devotion. Communism offered them that intoxicating certainty. To these young men, it was not merely a political theory, but a righteous crusade against the encroaching darkness of the Nazi regime. The ideological seduction was total. They convinced themselves that true loyalty belonged not to a king or a country, but to a global anti-fascist struggle headquartered in the Soviet Union. This profound ideological conviction would become the engine of their betrayal, blinding them to the atrocities of the regime they chose to serve. The recruitment was subtle, preying on their fervent idealism and their elite connections. Anthony Blunt, an art historian with an impeccable pedigree and a sharp, calculating mind, became a crucial node in this burgeoning network. Alongside Philby, Guy Burgess, Donald MacLean, and John Cairncross, they formed a clandestine brotherhood. They were the Cambridge Five, bound by a shared secret and a shared mission to dismantle the world order from the inside out. As the Second World War erupted and later hardened into the Cold War, these men seamlessly ascended the ranks of British power. They infiltrated MI5, MI6, and the Foreign Office, their aristocratic backgrounds acting as an impenetrable shield. The concept of affinity fraud, where a perpetrator exploits the inherent trust within a specific close-knit group, was executed here on a geopolitical scale. Because they were the right sort of men, from the right sort of families, their loyalty was simply assumed, never interrogated. This blind assumption of integrity allowed them to operate a devastating pipeline to the KGB. Mountains of classified documents were photographed in dimly lit flats. Dead drops were executed in quiet London parks, and the identities of Allied spies were systematically betrayed. The sheer volume of the intelligence handed over altered the balance of global power, giving the Soviet Union a terrifying advantage at the negotiating table and on the covert battlefield. The human cost of this ideological crusade was staggering and deeply personal. Behind the abstract exchange of geopolitical secrets lay the shattered lives of those betrayed. British and American agents operating behind the Iron Curtain were ambushed, captured, and executed because their names had been whispered to Moscow by men sipping sherry in London. The Cambridge Five viewed these casualties as necessary sacrifices for a greater good, a chilling testament to how radical ideology can completely erode human empathy. But the perfect facade could not hold forever. The investigative net, initially cast wide and loose, began to tighten as American cryptanalysts cracked Soviet communication codes. The Venona Project, a top-secret effort to decrypt KGB cables, revealed undeniable evidence of high-level moles within the British diplomatic and intelligence services. The quiet pursuit of truth began to expose deeper layers of the conspiracy, pointing directly toward the inner circle. Panic rippled through the network when the cipher breaks implicated Donald McLean. In a desperate move to protect the wider operation, Guy Burgess accompanied McLean in a sudden, shocking defection to Moscow in 1951. Their sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the establishment. It was the first public fracture in the illusion of elite loyalty, a glaring red flag that forced British counterintelligence to finally look inward with a critical, unforgiving eye. The spotlight of suspicion immediately swung to Kim Philby. As a close friend and former housemate of Burgess, Philby found himself subjected to grueling interrogations. Yet he masterfully deployed the tactics of narcissistic abuse and gaslighting, manipulating the perception of reality to make his accusers doubt their own sanity. He looked his closest colleagues in the eye, men who had trusted him with their lives and delivered impassioned, flawless lies. The betrayal was no longer just national. It was intimately, agonizingly personal. The echoes of that manipulation lingered for years. Philby survived the initial purge, officially cleared of espionage, though a cloud of suspicion forced his resignation from MI6. He retreated to Beirut, working as a journalist, believing he had outsmarted the system. But the evidence continued to mount, piece by agonizing piece, until the undeniable truth was laid bare. In 1963, his oldest friend in the intelligence service, Nicholas Elliott, was sent to Lebanon to extract a confession. The confrontation in a quiet Beirut apartment was a masterclass in psychological tension. Two men, bound by decades of shared history and shattered trust, facing the ultimate reckoning. Elliott offered immunity in exchange for a full debriefing, appealing to the ghosts of their past friendship. Philby, cornered and out of options, offered a partial confession. But true to his nature, the master deceiver had one final move to play. He vanished into the rainy night, slipping aboard a Soviet freighter bound for the country he had served in the shadows for 30 years. Philby's defection to Moscow was the final, humiliating blow to British prestige. The public revelation that the former head of the anti-Soviet section of MI6 was himself a Soviet agent caused an international scandal of unprecedented proportions. The trust between British and American intelligence agencies was deeply fractured. The CIA viewed their British counterparts with open contempt and profound suspicion, a paranoia that would paralyze joint operations for years to come. Yet the rot went deeper still, and the establishment's instinct for self-preservation proved as strong as its desire for justice. While Philby, Burgess, and McLean lived out their days in bleak Soviet exile, Anthony Blunt remained in London. He had transitioned from wartime intelligence to become the surveyor of the Queen's pictures, a position of immense cultural prestige. When MI5 finally secured a confession from Blunt in 1964, they did not arrest him. Instead, they offered him immunity in exchange for his cooperation, a decision that prioritized avoiding a royal scandal over delivering public accountability. For 15 years, Blunt continued his comfortable life, his treason a closely guarded secret known only to a select few. The elite protected their own, demonstrating a chilling hypocrisy. The very system that the Cambridge spies had sought to destroy ended up shielding one of its architects from the consequences of his betrayal. It was not until 1979 that the truth about Anthony Blunt was dragged into the unforgiving light of public scrutiny. Unmasked on the floor of the House of Commons, the disgraced art historian was stripped of his knighthood, ending his days as a pariah. The delayed justice only deepened the public's cynicism. It laid bare the uncomfortable reality that accountability in cases of profound national betrayal is often mitigated by class, privilege, and the desperate need to maintain institutional dignity. The legacy of this spy ring remains a haunting study in the psychology of ideological fanaticism. These were not men driven by financial greed or blackmailed into submission. They were motivated by a supreme arrogance, a belief that their intellect and their moral compass were superior to the democratic consensus of their nation. They weaponized the trust inherently granted to their social class, turning the very virtues of friendship, loyalty, and duty into instruments of catastrophic harm. The scars left by the Cambridge Five serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of institutional security. Their decades-long deception forces a continuous, uncomfortable reckoning with the nature of loyalty itself. It proves that the most dangerous adversaries do not always breach the gates from the outside. Sometimes they are born within the citadel, raised at its finest tables, and handed the keys to the kingdom, all while quietly waiting for the perfect moment to burn it to the ground.